Lieutenant Sarah Chun stepped off the transport helicopter onto the dusty tarmac of forward operating base Thunderbolt in Afghanistan. The rotor wash whipped her dark hair around her face as she shouldered her gear bag and surveyed her new temporary assignment. At 28, she carried herself with quiet confidence, her compact frame moving with practiced efficiency as she made her way toward the operations center. The base buzzed with activity even in the pre-dawn hours. Soldiers moved between buildings with purpose, their boots creating rhythmic patterns on the gravel paths. Sarah had been here before, but this assignment felt different. She wasn't just another intelligence officer rotating through for a standard briefing. This time, she was here to lead a crucial analysis operation that could change the course of ongoing missions in the region. As she approached the main briefing hall, Sarah noticed a group of Navy SEALs gathered near the entrance. Their conversation carried the easy banter of men who had shared countless dangerous missions together. She recognized the type immediately, elite operators who had earned their swagger through blood, sweat, and countless successful operations in the world's most dangerous places. The tallest of the group, a man with sun-weathered skin and piercing blue eyes, noticed her approach first. Chief Petty Officer Marcus "Tank" Rodriguez had been deployed to this region 4 times in the past 6 years. His reputation preceded him, a decorated SEAL with more combat operations under his belt than most soldiers saw in entire careers. Tank's presence commanded respect, and his team looked to him not just for leadership, but for the kind of battlefield wisdom that kept them alive. Sarah walked past the group, offering a polite nod of acknowledgement. She had learned early in her military career that first impressions mattered, especially in environments where trust could mean the difference between life and death. Her uniform was crisp despite the long journey, her rank insignia clearly visible on her collar, the silver bars of a lieutenant. Tank's eyes followed her movement, taking in her appearance with the analytical gaze of someone trained to assess threats and allies quickly. He noticed her confident stride, the way she carried her equipment, and, most prominently, her rank. A slight smirk crossed his face as he turned back to his teammates. "Looks like we've got another college graduate coming to tell us how to do our jobs," Tank muttered to his squad, his voice carrying just enough volume to ensure Sarah could hear him. The comment drew chuckles from his teammates, men who had grown accustomed to Tank's direct approach to military hierarchy. Petty Officer First Class Jake Sullivan, Tank's longtime friend and fellow SEAL, shook his head with amusement. "Come on, Tank. Give her a chance. You don't even know what she's here for." Tank's expression remained skeptical. "I know exactly what she's here for, Sully. Same thing they always send these junior officers for. To brief us on intelligence we already know, using fancy presentations to tell us what the enemy's doing in places we've been patrolling for months." The conversation continued as Sarah entered the building, but she had heard enough to understand the dynamic she was walking into. This wasn't her first encounter with skeptical special operations personnel. Throughout her 7-year career, she had faced similar attitudes from combat veterans who questioned whether someone with her background and apparent youth could contribute meaningfully to their operations. Inside the operations center, Sarah was greeted by Colonel James Morrison, the base commander. Morrison was a career infantry officer with silver hair and kind eyes that had seen too much war. He had specifically requested Sarah's assignment to his base after reviewing her impressive track record in intelligence analysis and strategic planning. "Lieutenant Chun, welcome back to Thunderbolt," Morrison said, extending his hand. "I trust your flight was comfortable." "As comfortable as military transport gets, sir," Sarah replied with a slight smile. "Thank you for requesting me for this operation. I've been looking forward to working with your teams." Morrison led her toward a secure briefing room, passing several displays showing real-time intelligence feeds from across the region. "I'll be honest with you, Lieutenant. This assignment isn't going to be easy. We've got some of the best operators in the military here, but they've also got strong opinions about how things should be done. They've been successful using their current methods, so they might be resistant to change." Sarah nodded, understanding the subtext. "I'm used to working with special operations personnel, sir. I know they value results over rank, and I respect that. My job isn't to tell them how to do their operations. It's to provide them with intelligence that makes their missions more effective and safer." "That's exactly what I wanted to hear," Morrison said, stopping at a door marked with security warnings. "The SEALs especially have been running missions in this area for the past 8 months. They know the terrain, they know the local population, and they've built relationships with tribal leaders that took years to develop. But they've hit some roadblocks recently, and I think your expertise might help break through them." As Morrison spoke, Sarah's mind was already processing the challenge ahead. She had reviewed the mission files during her flight, studying patterns of enemy activity, analyzing failed operations, and identifying potential opportunities that might have been overlooked. Her approach to intelligence work was methodical but creative, combining traditional analysis with innovative thinking that had earned her recognition throughout the intelligence community. The briefing room contained a large table surrounded by chairs, multiple computer workstations, and wall-mounted displays showing maps of the surrounding region. Sarah set down her gear and began unpacking her laptop and files, preparing for what she knew would be a crucial first meeting with the SEAL team. "The SEALs will be here in 30 minutes for the initial briefing," Morrison explained. "I'll let you get settled and review the latest intelligence reports. Remember, these men have seen more combat than most people can imagine. They've earned their confidence through experience, but that same confidence can sometimes make them resistant to new ideas." After Morrison left, Sarah spent the quiet time familiarizing herself with the layout of the room and organizing her materials. She had learned that preparation was key to earning respect from special operations personnel. They could spot someone who was unprepared or uncertain from across a room, and first impressions in these environments were often permanent. As she worked, Sarah reflected on her journey to this moment. Her path to military intelligence had been unconventional. She had started college studying international relations, but after the September 11th attacks, she felt compelled to serve her country in a more direct way. Military intelligence had appealed to her analytical mind and desire to make a meaningful impact on national security. Her first assignment had been in Iraq, where she quickly distinguished herself by identifying patterns in insurgent activity that had been missed by previous analysts. Her ability to think beyond conventional approaches had helped prevent several attacks and provided actionable intelligence that led to successful operations against high-value targets. The door to the briefing room opened, and Tank Rodriguez entered, followed by his 5-man SEAL team. Each man moved with the controlled confidence that came from years of elite training and combat experience. Their gear was worn but meticulously maintained, their expressions alert but relaxed, the look of professionals comfortable in their environment. Sarah stood and faced the group, her posture professional but not rigid. "Good morning, gentlemen. I'm Lieutenant Shun. I'll be working with you on intelligence support for your upcoming operations." Tank's eyes met hers directly, and she could see him making the same assessment she had watched countless times before. His gaze took in her youth, her rank, her gender, and her apparent lack of combat decorations. In his expression, she could read the familiar mixture of skepticism and resignation that suggested he expected this briefing to be another waste of his team's time. "Ma'am," Tank replied, his tone respectful but noticeably cool. "Chief Rodriguez, this is my team." He gestured to each man in turn. "Sullivan, Martinez, Brooks, Thompson, and Watson. We're ready to hear what headquarters thinks we should know about our area of operations." The subtle emphasis on headquarters wasn't lost on Sarah. It was a common way for field operators to distance themselves from what they perceived as desk-bound analysts who lacked real-world experience. She had heard similar comments before and had learned not to take them personally, but she also understood that overcoming this initial skepticism was crucial to the success of her mission. "I appreciate you taking the time for this briefing," Sarah began, moving toward the wall display. "I know you've been operating in this region for several months, and I'm not here to tell you things you already know about your area. Instead, I'd like to share some analysis that might provide new perspectives on patterns we've been tracking." As Sarah began her presentation, she noticed Tank's body language, arms crossed, weight shifted to one hip, expression neutral but clearly skeptical. His teammates followed his lead, settling into chairs with the patience of men accustomed to mandatory briefings that rarely provided useful information. Sarah's presentation began with a comprehensive overview of recent enemy activity in their operational area. She had spent weeks analyzing intelligence reports, drone footage, intercepted communications, and human intelligence reports to build a complete picture of insurgent operations. Her analysis revealed patterns that hadn't been previously identified, connections between seemingly unrelated incidents, and potential vulnerabilities in enemy operations. As she spoke, Sarah noticed subtle changes in her audience's attention level. Tank's expression remained skeptical, but she caught him leaning forward slightly when she described a pattern of improvised explosive device placements that had previously been attributed to random targeting. Her analysis suggested a more sophisticated strategy behind the attacks, one that indicated the presence of a highly skilled bomb maker who was systematically testing different locations and techniques. The spacing between these IED locations isn't random, Sarah explained, using a laser pointer to highlight positions on the map. There's a mathematical progression that suggests the bomb maker is conducting experiments, testing different approaches to maximize casualties while minimizing the risk of detection. Petty Officer Martinez, the team's explosives expert, straightened in his chair. Ma'am, we've been tracking those same incidents. We figured it was just opportunistic targeting based on where they could plant devices without being seen. Sarah nodded, understanding his perspective. That's a logical conclusion based on the individual incidents. But when you look at the pattern over time and cross-reference it with intercepted communications and changes in local population behavior, it suggests something more systematic. She clicked to the next slide, which showed a detailed timeline correlating the IED attacks with other intelligence indicators. Notice how each incident is followed by a period of reduced local market activity in the surrounding area. That's not typical for random attacks. It suggests the local population has some advanced knowledge of where these devices might be placed. Tank uncrossed his arms, his attention now fully focused on the presentation. Despite his initial skepticism, he had to admit that Sarah's analysis was revealing connections he hadn't considered. His team had been treating each IED incident as an isolated event, focusing on immediate threats and tactical responses rather than looking for broader strategic patterns. The briefing continued for another hour, with Sarah presenting increasingly detailed analysis of enemy operations, local population dynamics, and potential opportunities for disrupting insurgent activities. Her presentation was thorough but not overwhelming, clearly organized, and supported by solid evidence. Most importantly, she demonstrated understanding of the practical challenges facing the SEAL team while offering insights that could improve their operational effectiveness. As the briefing concluded, Tank's demeanor had shifted noticeably. While he still maintained his professional distance, the obvious skepticism had been replaced by something approaching respect. Sarah's analysis had revealed gaps in his team's understanding of their operational environment, and her recommendations were practical and actionable rather than theoretical. Lieutenant, Tank said as Sarah finished her presentation, I'll admit you've given us some things to think about. We hadn't considered the connection between the IED patterns and local population behavior. That could be useful for our next patrol. Sarah recognized this as significant progress. For someone like Tank to acknowledge the value of her analysis in front of his team represented a major step forward in establishing her credibility. However, she also understood that real acceptance would require more than a single briefing. She needed to prove that her intelligence could contribute to successful operations and help keep his team safe. I'm glad you found it helpful, Chief, Sarah replied. I'm planning to stay on base for the next 2 weeks to provide ongoing intelligence support for your operations. If you'd like, I can accompany your next planning session to help integrate this analysis into your mission preparation. Tank considered her offer carefully. Standard protocol didn't require intelligence officers to participate in detailed mission planning, especially not junior officers without combat experience. However, Sarah's analysis had demonstrated a level of understanding that went beyond typical intelligence briefings. Her offer to remain involved suggested a commitment to supporting his team's success rather than simply completing a required briefing and moving on to the next assignment. We'll be planning our next operation tomorrow at 1,400 hours, Tank said after a moment. You're welcome to join us, but understand that we move fast, and we don't have time to explain everything for someone who's not familiar with our procedures. Sarah smiled, recognizing both the invitation and the challenge in Tank's words. I understand, Chief. I'll be there. As the SEAL team filed out of the briefing room, Sarah began packing her materials while reflecting on the interaction. The meeting had gone better than she had expected, but she knew the real test would come when her analysis was put into practice during actual operations. Tank and his team were reserving judgment until they could see whether her intelligence would prove valuable in the field. Colonel Morrison returned to the briefing room as Sarah finished organizing her files. How did it go, Lieutenant? Better than expected, sir, Sarah replied honestly. They're skeptical, but they're professional. Chief Rodriguez seems willing to give my analysis a chance, which is more than I hoped for initially. Morrison nodded approvingly. Tank's a good man and an excellent operator, but he's also protective of his team. They've been through a lot together, and he's not going to trust anyone with their safety until they've proven themselves. The fact that he invited you to their planning session suggests he's at least open to what you're offering. As Sarah prepared to leave the briefing room, she felt a mixture of optimism and determination. The initial meeting had gone well, but she understood that earning the complete trust and respect of Tank's team would require demonstrating the practical value of her intelligence in real-world situations. Tomorrow's planning session would be another opportunity to prove herself, and she was determined to make the most of it. The next afternoon, Sarah arrived at the SEAL team's planning room 15 minutes early, carrying her laptop and a folder of updated intelligence reports. The room was smaller and more functional than the formal briefing space they had used the previous day. Maps covered every wall, marked with colored pins indicating known enemy positions, patrol routes, and significant events. Communication equipment hummed quietly in one corner, maintaining contact with various observation posts around the base. Tank was already present, studying a detailed topographical map with intense concentration. He looked up as Sarah entered, offering a brief nod of acknowledgement before returning his attention to the map. His teammates arrived over the next several minutes, each carrying gear and notebooks, their expressions focused and serious. The casual banter from the previous day was absent. This was their work environment, and their professional demeanor reflected the life and death nature of their missions. "All right, gather around," Tank announced once everyone was present. "We've got a time-sensitive operation developing. Intelligence reports suggest a high-value target will be moving through our area tomorrow night, and we need to determine if we can intercept." Sarah opened her laptop and pulled up the latest intelligence updates she had received that morning. As Tank outlined the basic mission parameters, she cross-referenced his information with her analysis, looking for connections and potential complications that might not be immediately obvious. The target was Ahmed al-Rashid, a mid-level commander in the regional insurgent network who had been linked to several recent attacks against coalition forces. Intelligence indicated he would be traveling with a small security detail to meet with tribal leaders in a village approximately 12 kilometers from their base. "Standard approach would be to set up an observation post here," Tank said, pointing to a ridge overlooking the village. "We watch for his arrival, confirm identification, and decide whether to take him during the meeting or wait for him to leave." Sullivan studied the map carefully, tracing potential escape routes with his finger. "What's our extraction plan if things go sideways?" "That's a long way from base with limited cover." As the team discussed tactical options, Sarah noticed several details that didn't align with the patterns she had been tracking. She waited for an appropriate moment to speak, not wanting to interrupt their planning process, but recognizing information that could be crucial to their mission. "Chief Rodriguez," Sarah said during a brief pause in the conversation, "I've been analyzing al-Rashid's movement patterns over the past 2 months, and there are some inconsistencies with this intelligence report that might be worth considering." Tank looked up from the map, his expression curious rather than dismissive. "What kind of inconsistencies?" Sarah moved closer to the map, pointing to the village where the meeting was supposed to take place. "Al-Rashid has attended 6 meetings with tribal leaders in this area since March. In every previous case, he traveled at night and used a different route each time. This intelligence suggests he'll be traveling during daylight hours and using the main road. That's completely contrary to his established security protocol." The room fell silent as the team members absorbed this information. Tank's expression grew more serious as he considered the implications of Sarah's observation. Martinez leaned forward, studying the intelligence report more carefully. "You think it's a trap?" "I think it's worth questioning," Sarah replied carefully. "It's possible the intelligence is accurate, and al-Rashid has changed his procedures for some reason. But it's also possible that someone is feeding false information to draw coalition forces into a predetermined location." Thompson, the team's communications specialist, pulled up additional intelligence reports on his tablet. "Have there been any similar incidents recently? False intelligence leading to ambushes?" Sarah nodded, pulling up her own analysis. 3 operations in the past 6 weeks have involved intelligence that later proved to be questionable. In each case, coalition forces found themselves in tactically disadvantageous positions when they arrived at the reported locations. Tank studied Sarah's information with growing concern. His team had been planning to approach the village using a route that would leave them exposed if enemy forces were lying in wait. The ridge position that had seemed ideal for observation would become a death trap if insurgents were positioned to surround it. "Walk me through your analysis," Tank said, his tone now completely professional and focused. Sarah expanded her map display to show the broader region, highlighting the locations of previous operations and the patterns she had identified. The common element in all these incidents is that the intelligence came through the same human source, someone codenamed Falcon. This source has provided accurate information in the past, which is why the intelligence has been trusted. But, looking at the pattern over time, it appears Falcon may have been compromised. She pointed to specific locations on the map as she continued her explanation. Each time intelligence from Falcon has led to coalition operations, there have been secondary indicators that suggested enemy forces were prepared for our arrival. Increased radio chatter in the area, unusual movement patterns by local civilians, and positioning of potential ambush sites all suggest that insurgents had advanced knowledge of our plans. Sullivan whistled softly. If you're right, we would have walked right into a kill zone. Tank's expression was grim as he processed the implications. How confident are you in this assessment? Sarah had been hoping to avoid this question, knowing that her answer could influence life and death decisions for Tank's team. However, she also understood that providing honest, accurate analysis was her primary responsibility, regardless of how uncomfortable it might be. Based on the pattern analysis and the deviation from Al-Rashid's normal behavior, I'd estimate there's a 70% probability that this intelligence is either deliberately false or severely compromised, Sarah said. The risk level for proceeding with the operation as planned would be extremely high. The room fell silent again as Tank weighed Sarah's assessment against the potential value of capturing Al-Rashid. The target was genuinely important. His removal from the insurgent network could significantly disrupt enemy operations in the region. However, losing his entire team in an ambush would be catastrophic not just for the mission, but for the broader coalition effort in the area. What would you recommend? Tank asked, his question catching Sarah slightly off guard. She had expected to provide intelligence and analysis, but she hadn't anticipated being asked for operational recommendations. This was moving beyond her typical role as an intelligence officer into the realm of mission planning, which required a different kind of responsibility and expertise. If the intelligence is accurate, we lose a valuable opportunity to capture Al-Rashid, Sarah said carefully. But if the intelligence is false, proceeding with the mission could result in casualties or worse. From a risk-benefit perspective, I would recommend either canceling the operation or significantly modifying the approach to account for the possibility of an ambush. Tank nodded slowly, then turned to his teammates. Opinions. The discussion that followed demonstrated the team's experience and tactical expertise. Each member contributed perspectives based on their specialized knowledge and previous operations in the region. Martinez analyzed potential explosive threats, Sullivan assessed escape routes and defensive positions, Brooks evaluated support options, Thompson considered communication challenges, and Watson examined medical evacuation procedures. As Sarah listened to their conversation, she gained new appreciation for the complexity of special operations planning. Every detail had to be considered, every contingency planned for, and every risk carefully weighed against potential benefits. The stakes were not abstract. They were measured in the lives of the team members and the success of critical missions. After 30 minutes of discussion, Tank made his decision. We're going to modify the mission. Instead of a direct approach to the village, we'll conduct a reconnaissance operation from multiple positions. If Al-Rashid shows up, and the situation looks legitimate, we can adapt our plan accordingly. If it's an ambush, we'll be positioned to observe and potentially turn the tables. The modified mission plan was significantly more complex than the original approach, requiring coordination between multiple observation posts and carefully timed movements to avoid detection. However, it also provided greater flexibility and reduced the risk of the team being caught in a predetermined kill zone. As the planning session continued, Sarah found herself being included in detailed tactical discussions that went far beyond her original role as an intelligence briefer. Tank and his teammates asked for her input on enemy behavior patterns, likely response scenarios, and potential complications that might arise during the operation. Lieutenant, Tank said as the session neared its conclusion, would you be able to monitor communications and provide real-time intelligence updates during the operation tomorrow night? Sarah was surprised by the request, but recognized it as a significant expression of trust. Tank was asking her to become part of his team's operational support structure, providing ongoing analysis and guidance during the mission itself. Absolutely, Chief, Sarah replied. I can coordinate with the operations center to monitor all available intelligence feeds and provide updates as the situation develops. The planning session concluded with detailed assignments for each team member and established communication protocols for the operation. Sarah spent the remainder of the afternoon reviewing intelligence reports and preparing briefing materials that would support the modified mission plan. That evening, Sarah joined Tank and several of his teammates for dinner in the base dining facility. The conversation was more relaxed than their professional interactions, touching on topics ranging from their backgrounds and families to their experiences in different deployments. Sarah learned that Tank had grown up in Texas, joined the Navy immediately after high school, and had been serving with special operations units for over a decade. "I'll admit, Lieutenant," Tank said during a pause in the conversation, "I wasn't expecting much from yesterday's briefing. We get a lot of intelligence officers who show up with PowerPoint presentations that don't tell us anything we don't already know." Sarah smiled, understanding the compliment implicit in his statement. "I appreciate that, Chief. I know building trust with operational teams takes time, and I'm grateful you're giving me the opportunity to prove myself." Sullivan raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. "Here's to hopefully not walking into an ambush tomorrow night, because someone actually looked at the intelligence critically." The comment drew laughter from the group, but it also highlighted the serious nature of their work. Sarah's analysis had potentially prevented a dangerous situation, but the real test would come during the actual operation. If her assessment proved correct and they avoided an ambush, it would significantly enhance her credibility with the team. If she was wrong and they missed an opportunity to capture al-Rashid, it could damage the trust she had been working to build. After dinner, Sarah returned to her quarters to prepare for the next day's operation. She spent several hours reviewing all available intelligence reports, updating her analysis, and preparing contingency assessments for various scenarios that might develop during the mission. As she worked, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her relationship with Tank's team had evolved in just 2 days. The initial skepticism and dismissive attitudes had been replaced by professional respect and inclusion in critical operational planning. Her analysis had proven valuable, and her willingness to take responsibility for difficult assessments had demonstrated her commitment to the team's success. However, Sarah also understood that this progress was fragile. Military special operations units form tight bonds based on shared experiences and proven reliability under pressure. Her acceptance into that circle would require demonstrating not just analytical skills, but judgment, courage, and unwavering commitment to the team's welfare. The next morning brought increased tension as final preparations for the evening operation began. Tank's team conducted equipment checks, reviewed communication procedures, and rehearsed various scenarios they might encounter. Sarah coordinated with the base intelligence staff to ensure all available monitoring resources would be focused on their area of operations. Colonel Morrison stopped by the operations center during the afternoon to check on mission preparations. "How are you feeling about tonight, Lieutenant?" "Confident in the analysis, sir," Sarah replied, "but obviously concerned about the potential consequences if I'm wrong." Morrison nodded understandingly. "That's exactly the attitude I want to see. Overconfidence can be as dangerous as uncertainty in these situations. Your job is to provide the best analysis possible based on available information, not to guarantee outcomes." As evening approached, Tank's team began their final preparations for departure. Sarah took her position in the operations center, where she had access to communication feeds, drone footage, and intelligence updates from various sources. Her role would be to monitor the developing situation and provide real-time analysis and recommendations to support the team's decision-making. Just before the team departed, Tank stopped by the operations center to coordinate final communication procedures with Sarah. "Any last-minute changes to your assessment?" Sarah had been monitoring intelligence feeds throughout the day, looking for any new information that might change her analysis. "Nothing that changes my overall assessment, Chief. I'm still concerned about the reliability of the source intelligence, and I think your modified approach is the right choice." Tank nodded, his expression serious but confident. "All right then. We'll check in every 30 minutes unless something significant develops. If you see anything that changes the picture, don't hesitate to call immediately." As Tank's team departed the base and headed toward their area of operations, Sarah settled in for what would likely be a long night of monitoring and analysis. The real test of her intelligence work was about to begin, and the stakes could not be higher. The operations center hummed with quiet activity as Sarah monitored multiple intelligence feeds from her workstation. 3 large displays showed real-time drone footage from different angles of the target area, while her laptop screen was divided between communication channels, intercepted radio traffic, and a digital map tracking Tank's team movements. The green dots representing the SEAL team had been moving steadily toward their first observation position for the past 90 minutes. At 2,130 hours, Tank's voice crackled through the secure communication system. Base, this is Alpha Team. We're in position at Observation Post 1. No movement in the target area yet. All quiet. Sarah keyed her microphone to respond. Copy, Alpha Team. Drone coverage shows clear approaches to your position. No unusual activity detected in surrounding areas. The waiting began. Intelligence suggested Al-Rashid's meeting was scheduled for sometime between 2,200 and 2,400 hours, but the exact timing remained uncertain. Sarah continued monitoring communication intercepts and movement patterns throughout the region, looking for any signs that might confirm or contradict their intelligence about the planned meeting. At 2,145 hours, Sarah noticed something that made her lean forward in her chair. A pattern of radio communications was developing in areas surrounding the target village, short, coded transmissions that followed a specific sequence she had seen before in her analysis of previous operations. Alpha Team, Base, Sarah called urgently. I'm detecting radio activity that matches the communication patterns from previous suspected ambush operations. Multiple transmitters in grid squares 478 and 481, approximately 2 kilometers north and east of your position. Tank's response was immediate and professional. Copy, Base. We're observing increased vehicle movement on the main road. 3 pickups traveling without lights, moving slowly toward the village. Sarah quickly pulled up her analysis files, cross-referencing the current activity with patterns from previous incidents. The similarities were striking, the same type of communication patterns, similar vehicle movements, and timing that matched previous false intelligence operations. Alpha Team, based on pattern analysis, I assess high probability this is the ambush scenario we discussed. Radio signatures match previous false intelligence operations with 95% correlation. The communication channel went silent for several long moments as Tank processed this information and observed the developing situation. Sarah watched the drone feeds anxiously, seeing the vehicles Tank had mentioned approaching the village while noting additional movement in areas that would be ideal for setting up ambush positions. Base, Alpha Team. Tank's voice came back calm but urgent. We concur with your assessment. We're observing coordinated positioning of vehicles and personnel that suggests prepared ambush sites. No sign of Al-Rashid or any legitimate tribal meeting. We're moving to alternate observation position to get better view of enemy dispositions. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and continued anxiety. Her analysis had been correct about the false intelligence, but the situation was far from over. Tank's team was now in position to observe what appeared to be a well-planned ambush, but they were also potentially at risk if enemy forces detected their presence. Over the next hour, the true scope of the insurgent operation became clear. Sarah watched through drone feeds as more than 30 armed individuals took positions around the village and along the routes coalition forces would have used in the original mission plan. The ambush had been carefully planned and would have been devastating if Tank's team had proceeded with their initial approach. This is sophisticated, Tank reported during one of his regular check-ins. They've got overwatch positions, blocking forces, and what looks like prepared firing positions with interlocking fields of fire. If we had come in as originally planned, we would have been completely surrounded within minutes. Sarah documented everything she observed, knowing that this intelligence would be crucial for understanding how insurgents were obtaining information about coalition operations and planning countermeasures. The level of preparation and coordination suggested the involvement of experienced military planners, not the typical insurgent cell leaders they had been encountering. At 2,330 hours, the situation took an unexpected turn. Sarah noticed new radio traffic indicating that the insurgent forces were becoming concerned about the non-arrival of coalition forces. Their communications suggested they had expected the American team to arrive by 2,300 hours based on previous operational patterns. Alpha Team, Base, Sarah transmitted. Enemy communications indicate they're concerned about your non-arrival. They may be preparing to abandon positions soon. Tank's response revealed the tactical opportunity this development presented. Copy, Base. We're in position to follow them when they leave. Might be able to track them back to their base camp or safe house. Sarah quickly coordinated with the drone operators to ensure continuous coverage of the area as insurgent forces began their withdrawal. What had started as a potential disaster was turning into an intelligence-gathering opportunity that could provide valuable information about enemy operations and leadership. The withdrawal began at midnight, with insurgent vehicles and personnel departing the area in small groups using different routes. Tank's team, positioned at their alternate observation post, was able to track several groups and identify potential staging areas and safe houses that hadn't been previously known to coalition intelligence. Base, we've got positive identification on at least 12 individuals, 3 vehicles with distinctive markings, and 2 possible safe house locations, Tank reported as the last of the insurgent forces departed the area. This intelligence should help us track down the network responsible for the false information. Sarah spent the remainder of the night coordinating with base intelligence staff to process the information gathered during the operation. The mission that had started as a potential ambush had turned into one of the most successful intelligence-gathering operations of the deployment. Tank's team had avoided a dangerous trap and collected valuable information that would support future operations. As Tank's team returned to base in the early morning hours, Sarah prepared a detailed briefing on the night's events for Colonel Morrison and the intelligence staff. Her analysis had not only prevented casualties but had led to significant intelligence gains that would help protect other coalition forces and disrupt enemy operations. When Tank and his teammates entered the operations center at 0630 hours, their demeanor was noticeably different from their first meeting with Sarah just 3 days earlier. The skepticism and professional distance had been replaced by genuine respect and acceptance. Tank approached Sarah's workstation with a tired but satisfied expression. "Outstanding work last night, Lieutenant," Tank said, his tone carrying none of the previous reservations. "Your analysis probably saved our lives, and the intelligence we gathered should help prevent similar ambushes in the future." Sullivan nodded in agreement, looking exhausted but pleased with the mission outcome. "I've got to admit, I was skeptical when you first showed up with your PowerPoint presentation, but you proved you know what you're doing when it matters." Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction and relief. The successful outcome of the previous night's operation had established her credibility with Tank's team in a way that no amount of briefings or presentations could have achieved. She had demonstrated not just analytical skills, but judgment under pressure and unwavering commitment to the team's safety. Colonel Morrison arrived for the post-operation briefing as Sarah was finishing her initial report. "I understand last night went well," he said, looking pleased with the results. "Better than well, sir," Tank interjected. "Lieutenant Chin's analysis prevented us from walking into a sophisticated ambush and turned the operation into a major intelligence success. I can't remember a time when intelligence support was more directly responsible for mission success." Morrison smiled, clearly pleased with the outcome. "That's exactly what I was hoping for when I requested Lieutenant Chen for this assignment. Sometimes the best operations are the ones where nothing goes according to the original plan." The debriefing session that followed was detailed and comprehensive, with Tank's team providing tactical observations while Sarah contributed strategic analysis of the intelligence implications. The cooperation and mutual respect evident in their collaboration represented a complete transformation from their initial meeting. As the formal debriefing concluded, Tank approached Sarah privately. "Lieutenant, I owe you an apology for my attitude when you first arrived. I made assumptions based on rank and experience that weren't fair. You've proven that good intelligence work is about thinking, not just time and service." Sarah appreciated the gesture, but understood that Tank's initial skepticism had been based on legitimate concerns about protecting his team. "No apology necessary, Chief. You were right to be cautious about trusting someone new with your team's safety. I'm just glad I was able to prove myself when it mattered." "More than proved yourself," Tank replied. "You're part of the team now, as far as we're concerned. We'd be honored to have you support our future operations." The acceptance represented by Tank's words was worth more to Sarah than any formal recognition or commendation. Special operations teams like Tank's SEAL unit represented the pinnacle of military professionalism and capability. Being accepted as a trusted member of that community was an honor that few people in her position ever achieved. Over the following days, Sarah continued working with Tank's team on follow-up operations based on the intelligence gathered during the ambush observation mission. Her role evolved from providing briefings to participating in ongoing mission planning and real-time operational support. The team's trust in her judgment grew with each successful operation. The false intelligence network that had been targeting coalition forces was gradually dismantled through operations based on Sarah's analysis and Tank's tactical expertise. Several key insurgent leaders were captured, and the flow of false information that had been endangering coalition forces was significantly reduced. During one of their regular planning sessions, Martinez commented on how much their operational effectiveness had improved with Sarah's intelligence support. It's like having a crystal ball sometimes. You see connections and patterns that we miss because we're focused on the immediate tactical situation. Sarah had learned to appreciate the different perspectives that each team member brought to their operations. Tank's tactical expertise, Sullivan's operational experience, Martinez's technical knowledge, Brooks's strategic thinking, Thompson's communication skills, and Watson's medical training all contributed to their collective success. Her intelligence analysis had become another essential element in their comprehensive approach to mission planning and execution. The relationship that had started with mutual skepticism had evolved into genuine professional partnership based on proven results and shared commitment to mission success. Tank's team had learned to value Sarah's analytical abilities and judgment under pressure, while Sarah had gained deep appreciation for the complexity and professionalism of special operations. As Sarah prepared for her next assignment, she reflected on the lessons learned during her time with Tank's team. The experience had taught her that earning respect in military special operations required more than technical competence. It demanded courage, judgment, and unwavering commitment to the success and safety of the team. The transformation of their relationship from initial skepticism to complete acceptance demonstrated that professional military relationships were built on results rather than assumptions. Tank's initial doubts about Sarah's capabilities had been natural and appropriate given his responsibility for his team's welfare. Her systematic efforts to prove herself through quality analysis and reliable support had gradually overcome those doubts and established the foundation for long-term professional respect. The success of their collaboration also highlighted the importance of diverse perspectives in military operations. Sarah's analytical approach had complemented Tank's tactical expertise, creating a more comprehensive and effective approach to mission planning and execution than either could have achieved independently. Their partnership had improved operational outcomes while reducing risks for all involved. As news of their successful operations spread throughout the base and beyond, Sarah began receiving requests from other special operations units for intelligence support. The reputation she had built working with Tank's team opened doors to new opportunities and challenges that would define the next phase of her military career. However, the foundation of that success remained the respect and trust she had earned from Tank Rodriguez and his SEAL team through demonstrated competence under pressure and unwavering commitment to their shared mission. That relationship would continue to influence her approach to military intelligence work throughout her career, reminding her that the ultimate measure of intelligence analysis was its contribution to operational success and the safety of the warfighters who depended on it. 2 weeks after the successful ambush operation, Sarah found herself preparing for what would be her final mission with Tank's SEAL team before returning to her home base. The partnership that had developed between them had resulted in 6 successful operations, the capture of 12 insurgent leaders, and the dismantling of 2 major weapons smuggling networks. Their collaboration had become a model for intelligence operations integration that was being studied by special operations commands throughout the region. The final mission was particularly significant because it targeted the leadership of the false intelligence network that had nearly led Tank's team into an ambush during their first operation together. Weeks of patient analysis had traced the network back to its source, a sophisticated operation run by a former Iraqi military intelligence officer who had been recruiting and controlling sources within the coalition intelligence community. Sarah had spent the previous 3 days analyzing patterns of communication, movement, and operational timing that had finally revealed the location of the network's command center. The intelligence was solid, verified through multiple sources, and represented an opportunity to eliminate a threat that had been responsible for numerous coalition casualties over the past year. "This is personal for me," Tank admitted during their final planning session. "That false intelligence could have gotten my entire team killed. I want to make sure these guys never have the chance to do that to anyone else." Sarah understood Tank's feelings, but she also recognized the broader strategic importance of the mission. The intelligence network they were targeting represented a new level of sophistication in insurgent operations, the systematic penetration and manipulation of coalition intelligence systems. Eliminating this threat would not only prevent future casualties, but would also restore confidence in the intelligence gathering process that supported all coalition operations. The mission plan was complex, requiring coordination between Tank's SEAL team, an Army Special Forces unit, and close air support from both helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft. Sarah would be monitoring the operation from multiple intelligence feeds while coordinating real-time analysis with headquarters elements that had been tracking the same network from different angles. "Lieutenant," Tank said as the planning session concluded, "I want you to know that working with you has changed how I think about intelligence support. You've shown me that good analysis isn't just about collecting information. It's about understanding what that information means and having the courage to make tough calls when lives are on the line." Sarah was moved by Tank's words, recognizing the significance of earning such respect from someone with his experience and expertise. "Working with your team has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my career, Chief. You've taught me that intelligence work isn't about being right on paper. It's about providing analysis that helps people accomplish their missions and come home safely." The mission launched at 0200 hours the following morning, with Tank's team approaching the target compound through a series of coordinated movements designed to prevent escape while maintaining tactical surprise. Sarah monitored the operation from the base operations center, coordinating with drone operators, communication interceptors, and analysis teams to provide comprehensive intelligence support. The target compound was located in a remote area approximately 25 kilometers from the base, surrounded by rough terrain that provided natural defensive advantages but also limited escape routes. Intelligence indicated that 6 to 8 high-value individuals would be present, along with security personnel and technical equipment used for communication intercepts and intelligence analysis. "Alpha Team, base," Sarah transmitted as Tank's team approached their final assault position. "Latest intelligence shows 7 heat signatures in the main building, 3 in the communications facility, and 2 roving security patrols. No indication they're aware of your approach." Tank's response was calm and professional. "Copy, base. We're in position for final approach. Request confirmation of no civilian presence in target area." Sarah double-checked her analysis of the compound, reviewing days of surveillance data to ensure their intelligence was accurate. "Confirmed, Alpha Team. No civilian signatures detected. All personnel in compound match target profiles for military-age males with weapons signatures." The assault began at 0347 hours with synchronized attacks on multiple buildings within the compound. Tank's team moved with the precision and coordination that came from months of working together under the most demanding conditions. Sarah watched through drone feeds as they systematically cleared each building, capturing intelligence materials and apprehending personnel with minimal resistance. "Base, Alpha Team," Tank reported 20 minutes into the operation. "Primary target secured. We've got 5 detainees including the main target, plus significant intelligence materials. No friendly casualties, minimal enemy resistance." Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction as she coordinated the intelligence exploitation process that would begin immediately upon the team's return to base. The materials captured during the operation would provide insights into insurgent intelligence operations throughout the region and potentially prevent future attacks against coalition forces. However, the mission's success was just the beginning of a more complex process. The detainees would need to be interrogated, the captured materials analyzed, and the intelligence networks mapped to identify additional targets and threats. Sarah would be working with intelligence specialists from multiple agencies to extract maximum value from the operation's results. As Tank's team prepared for extraction, Sarah received an urgent communication from Colonel Morrison requesting her immediate presence in his office. The tone suggested something significant had developed, possibly related to the ongoing operation or its broader implications. "Lieutenant Sean," Morrison said as she entered his office, "I've just received word from higher headquarters about your performance during this deployment. You're being considered for immediate promotion and assignment to a joint task force that handles intelligence operations across multiple theaters." Sarah was surprised by the news, having been focused entirely on supporting Tank's operations without considering the broader career implications of her work. "Sir, I'm honored, but I'm not sure I'm ready for that level of responsibility." Morrison smiled, recognizing her response as exactly what he would have expected from someone with her character and professionalism. "The recommendation is coming from Tank Rodriguez himself, along with endorsements from every officer who has worked with you during this deployment. They're saying you represent the future of intelligence operations integration." The conversation was interrupted by the return of Tank's team to the base. Sarah excused herself to coordinate the initial processing of captured materials and detainees, but Morrison's words stayed with her as she worked through the post-operation procedures. Tank found Sarah in the Intelligence Processing Center several hours later, where she was reviewing preliminary analysis of documents captured during the raid. "I heard you might be leaving us for bigger things," he said with a mixture of pride and regret. "Nothing's been decided yet," Sarah replied, though she was beginning to understand that her time with Tank's team had been noticed by senior leadership throughout the special operations community. "I'm just focused on making sure we get maximum value from today's operation." Tank nodded, understanding her priorities, but also recognizing the significance of the opportunities being presented to her. "You know, when you first showed up here 3 weeks ago, I thought you were just another staff officer trying to justify your existence by briefing us on things we already knew. I couldn't have been more wrong." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Colonel Morrison and several senior officers Sarah didn't recognize. The group included representatives from Joint Task Force Headquarters, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and the Office of the Secretary of Defense's Special Operations Advisor. "Lieutenant Chun," Morrison announced formally, "I'd like you to meet some people who are very interested in your work." The briefing that followed was unlike anything Sarah had experienced in her military career. Senior officers from across the special operations and intelligence communities had been tracking the results of her collaboration with Tank's team. Her approach to intelligence analysis and operational integration was being considered as a model for broader implementation throughout military special operations. "Lieutenant," said Brigadier General Patricia Williams, the Joint Task Force commander, "your work here has demonstrated a level of intelligence operations integration that we've been trying to achieve for years. We'd like you to help us implement similar approaches across multiple theaters and operational units." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the scope of what was being proposed. The opportunity was extraordinary, but it would also mean leaving the type of direct operational support that had made her work with Tank's team so rewarding. "Ma'am," Sarah replied carefully, "I'm honored by the opportunity, but I need to understand exactly what would be expected. My experience has been with supporting small unit operations at the tactical level. I'm not sure how that translates to broader strategic responsibilities." General Williams smiled approvingly at Sarah's cautious response. "That's exactly the attitude we're looking for. We're not asking you to become a staff officer pushing papers around headquarters. We want you to take the approach you've developed here and teach it to intelligence officers throughout the special operations community." Tank, who had been listening to the conversation with growing understanding of its implications, stepped forward. "General, if I may, Lieutenant Chen's strength isn't just her analytical ability. It's her understanding that intelligence work is ultimately about supporting the people who have to execute the missions. That perspective is what makes her so effective." The general nodded, clearly impressed by Tank's insight. "Chief Rodriguez, your recommendation was instrumental in bringing Lieutenant Chun to our attention. We're hoping you might be willing to work with her in developing training programs that combine operational experience with advanced intelligence techniques." What followed was a discussion of opportunities that would reshape both Sarah's and Tank's military careers. The collaboration that had started with mutual skepticism had evolved into a professional partnership that was being recognized as a new model for intelligence operations integration. Their success had demonstrated that effective intelligence support required not just analytical skills, but understanding of operational realities and commitment to the success of the people who depended on that intelligence. As the formal meeting concluded, Sarah and Tank found themselves walking across the base in the early evening air, both processing the magnitude of what had just been proposed. The opportunities were exciting but also daunting, requiring them to move beyond their current roles into positions of broader responsibility and influence. "So what do you think?" Tank asked as they paused near the flight line where helicopters were preparing for evening missions. "I think 3 weeks ago, I was just trying to prove I could contribute to your team's success," Sarah replied thoughtfully. "Now they're asking me to help reshape how the entire special operations community approaches intelligence. It's overwhelming." Tank understood her feelings, having faced similar moments of career transition throughout his own military service. "You know what convinced me that you belonged on my team? It wasn't your analysis, as good as that was. It was your willingness to take responsibility for difficult decisions when lives were on the line. That's what leadership is really about." Their conversation continued as they watched helicopters depart for night missions, carrying other teams to operations that would depend on the same type of intelligence support that had made their partnership so successful. The work they had done together had contributed to a broader evolution in how special operations forces approached intelligence gathering and analysis. As Sarah prepared for sleep that night, she reflected on the transformation that had occurred during her 3-week assignment. She had arrived expecting to provide standard intelligence briefings to skeptical operators who would tolerate her presence without really valuing her contributions. Instead, she had found herself accepted as a trusted member of an elite team and was now being asked to help reshape intelligence operations across the special operations community. The journey from initial skepticism to complete acceptance had required proving herself through results rather than credentials. Tank's team had taught her that respect in military special operations was earned through demonstrated competence under pressure and unwavering commitment to mission success. Her analytical skills had been important, but her judgment, courage, and dedication to the team's welfare had been the qualities that ultimately earned their trust and respect. The opportunities being presented to her represented both validation of her achievements and responsibility for helping others develop similar capabilities. The challenge of translating her individual success with Tank's team into broader institutional change would require different skills and approaches, but the fundamental principles would remain the same. Intelligence work was ultimately about supporting the people whose lives depended on accurate, timely, and actionable analysis. 6 months later, Sarah stood at the podium in a secure briefing hall at Joint Special Operations Command headquarters, facing an audience of senior military leaders from across the special operations community. Her promotion to major had come through faster than anyone had expected, along with assignment as the lead intelligence integration advisor for a revolutionary new training program that would reshape how special operations forces approached intelligence support. The audience included representatives from every branch of special operations: Navy SEALs, Army Special Forces, Marine Raiders, Air Force Special Operations, and Joint Task Force commanders. Many were skeptical of yet another headquarters initiative that promised to improve intelligence support, having seen numerous similar programs fail to deliver meaningful results in operational environments. 6 months ago, I was a lieutenant trying to prove I could contribute something useful to a SEAL team that had every reason to be skeptical of my abilities, Sarah began, her voice carrying the confidence that had developed through months of successful operations and expanding responsibilities. Today, I'm here to share what that team taught me about the difference between intelligence that looks good on paper and intelligence that saves lives in the field. In the front row, Tank Rodriguez sat with the attentive posture of someone genuinely interested in what she had to say. His presence at the briefing represented more than just support for a former colleague. He had become co-developer of the training program they were presenting, bringing operational expertise to complement Sarah's analytical insights. The traditional approach to intelligence support treats information as a product to be delivered, Sarah continued, clicking to her first slide. Analysts gather data, create assessments, and brief operational units who are expected to incorporate that intelligence into their mission planning. This approach assumes that good analysis will automatically translate into operational success. She paused, making eye contact with several audience members who were nodding with recognition of the process she was describing. But what we learned through our operations in Afghanistan is that effective intelligence support requires integration, not just delivery. Intelligence officers need to understand operational realities, and operational personnel need to understand intelligence capabilities and limitations. The presentation that followed was unlike the typical headquarters briefing that most attendees were expecting. Instead of focusing on organizational structures or procedural changes, Sarah and Tank presented a comprehensive approach to intelligence operations integration that had evolved through trial and error in actual combat operations. The key breakthrough came when we stopped thinking about intelligence as something that gets passed from analysts to operators, Tank explained during his portion of the presentation. Instead, we started thinking about intelligence as a continuous process that involves everyone from the strategic level down to individual team members. Their approach emphasized real-world collaboration between intelligence personnel and operational teams, with intelligence officers participating directly in mission planning and execution rather than providing support from remote locations. This required changes in training, organization, and operational procedures that challenged traditional boundaries between different military specialties. The most important lesson we learned, Sarah continued, is that building trust between intelligence and operations personnel requires shared risk and demonstrated competence under pressure. Intelligence officers need to prove they understand the life and death consequences of their analysis, and operational personnel need to understand how their missions contribute to broader intelligence objectives. The audience was clearly engaged, with several senior officers taking detailed notes and asking specific questions about implementation challenges. The skepticism that had been evident at the beginning of the briefing was being replaced by genuine interest in the practical applications of what Sarah and Tank were proposing. Colonel Morrison, who had traveled from Afghanistan to attend the briefing, stood to address the audience during the question period. I've had the privilege of observing Lieutenant Chen's, now Major Chen's, work firsthand. What she and Chief Rodriguez have developed isn't theoretical. It's based on operational results that prevented casualties and led to mission success in some of the most challenging environments our forces face. The discussion that followed revealed both enthusiasm for the new approach and concerns about the practical challenges of implementation. Senior officers understood the potential value of better intelligence operations integration, but they also recognized the institutional obstacles that would need to be overcome to achieve meaningful change. The biggest challenge we face, acknowledged General Williams during the closing discussion, is overcoming years of organizational separation between intelligence and operations communities. This program represents a fundamental shift in how we approach special operations mission planning and execution. After the formal briefing concluded, Sarah found herself surrounded by officers seeking additional details about specific aspects of the program. The response was overwhelmingly positive, but she also understood that translating briefing room enthusiasm into actual organizational change would require sustained effort and strong leadership support. Tank approached her as the crowd began to disperse, his expression reflecting pride in what they had accomplished together. I think that went well. You've come a long way from that nervous lieutenant who showed up at our base 6 months ago. Sarah smiled, remembering her initial anxiety about proving herself to Tank's team. I was thinking about that this morning. 6 months ago, I was worried about whether you would respect my analysis. Today, we're briefing generals on how to change the way the entire special operations community approaches intelligence. Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of several senior officers who wanted to discuss implementation details and potential pilot programs. The briefing had generated significant interest in testing their approach with other units, which would require careful planning to ensure successful outcomes. Over the following weeks, Sarah and Tank worked to develop detailed implementation plans for pilot programs with selected special operations units. Their approach emphasized gradual integration rather than sudden organizational changes, allowing units to adapt their procedures while maintaining operational effectiveness. The first pilot program was implemented with a Marine Special Operations Unit preparing for deployment to Africa. Sarah spent 2 weeks working with the unit's intelligence officer and team leaders to adapt the integration model to their specific operational requirements and deployment environment. The key is building personal relationships based on mutual respect and shared objectives, Sarah explained to Major Lisa Rodriguez, the Marine unit's intelligence officer. You can't just show up and expect immediate acceptance. You have to prove your value through results and demonstrate genuine commitment to the team's success. The Marine pilot program was followed by similar implementations with Army Special Forces and Air Force Special Operations units. Each deployment provided additional lessons about adapting the integration model to different organizational cultures and operational environments. Tank's role in the program evolved from operational advisor to full-time instructor, working with special operations personnel to help them understand how to effectively utilize embedded intelligence support. His credibility with operational units was crucial for overcoming the skepticism that many teams initially expressed about changing their established procedures. The hardest part isn't teaching the technical skills, Tank observed during one of their program development sessions. It's changing attitudes and building trust between communities that have operated independently for decades. 6 months into the pilot program implementation, the results were exceeding all expectations. Units that had adopted the integrated approach were reporting significant improvements in mission success rates, reduction in casualties, and enhanced capability to adapt to changing operational environments. Sarah's role continued to expand as word of the program's success spread throughout the special operations and intelligence communities. She was promoted to lieutenant colonel and assigned as director of the newly established Intelligence Integration Training Center, with responsibility for developing doctrine and training programs that would eventually be adopted across all special operations forces. The recognition of her work extended beyond the military community. Sarah was awarded the Defense Distinguished Service Medal for her contributions to improving intelligence operations integration, and her approach was being studied by allied nations seeking to improve their own special operations capabilities. During the award ceremony, Tank served as one of the presenters, reading a citation that described how Sarah's innovative approach to intelligence support had revolutionized special operations mission planning and execution, resulting in enhanced operational effectiveness and reduced casualties across multiple theaters of operation. What makes this recognition particularly meaningful, Tank said during his remarks, is that it represents the success of an approach based on mutual respect, shared risk, and commitment to mission accomplishment. Major Chin didn't just develop new procedures. She demonstrated that effective intelligence support requires courage, judgment, and unwavering dedication to the people who depend on that intelligence. After the ceremony, Sarah and Tank walked across the parade ground, where she had first been briefed about her assignment to his team more than a year earlier. The journey from initial skepticism to institutional transformation had been remarkable, but both understood that the real measure of their success would be the continued effectiveness of the units implementing their approach. "So what's next?" Tank asked as they paused near the building where they had first worked together on mission planning. "There's interest in expanding the program internationally," Sarah replied. "Allied nations want to understand how we've improved intelligence operations integration, and there are opportunities to develop similar programs with partner forces." Tank nodded, understanding the broader implications of what they had accomplished. "It's hard to believe this all started because I was skeptical about whether some lieutenant from headquarters could tell us anything useful about our area of operations." Sarah laughed, remembering his initial reaction to her arrival at the base. "You were right to be skeptical. I had to prove myself before I could expect your team to trust my analysis with their lives. That's the foundation of everything we've built since then." Their conversation continued as they discussed future developments in intelligence operations integration and the challenges of implementing their approach across increasingly complex operational environments. The program they had developed was continuing to evolve, incorporating lessons learned from each new implementation and adapting to changing technological and operational requirements. As Sarah prepared for her next assignment, leading an international team developing intelligence integration standards for Allied Special Operations Forces, she reflected on the transformation that had occurred since her first meeting with Tank's skeptical SEAL team. The journey from initial dismissal to institutional recognition had required proving herself through results rather than credentials, building trust through shared risk and demonstrated competence, and maintaining focus on the ultimate objective of supporting the people whose lives depended on effective intelligence. Those lessons had shaped not just her approach to intelligence work, but her understanding of leadership and professional development. The program she and Tank had developed represented more than just improved procedures. It demonstrated that meaningful organizational change was possible when individuals were willing to challenge conventional approaches and take responsibility for results. Their success had shown that the most effective innovations often came from frontline collaboration rather than top-down directives. Years later, when military historians analyzed the evolution of special operations intelligence support, they would identify Sarah's work with Tank SEAL team as a turning point in how military organizations approached the integration of intelligence and operations. But, for Sarah, the most important recognition remained the respect and trust she had earned from the operators whose lives depended on the intelligence support she provided. The skeptical SEAL who had initially questioned her credentials had become not just a professional colleague, but a lifelong friend whose validation meant more than any formal award or promotion. Tank's acceptance had represented the approval of a community that measured worth through performance under pressure rather than academic credentials or organizational position. Their partnership had demonstrated that professional respect transcended traditional military hierarchies and specialty boundaries when individuals shared commitment to mission success and willingness to take responsibility for results. The transformation of their relationship from mutual skepticism to complete trust had become a model for effective military collaboration that continued to influence training and doctrine development throughout the special operations community. As Sarah departed for her new assignment, she carried with her not just the technical knowledge and professional experience gained through working with Tank's team, but the understanding that true leadership was measured by the willingness to prove oneself through results and the commitment to supporting the people who depended on effective performance. Those lessons would continue to guide her throughout the remainder of her military career and beyond, shaping her approach to challenges that extended far beyond the specific field of intelligence operations.